Alright, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel, Anthony Makes Videos. I'm Anthony, and today's video is going to be a book review of The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. Many of you guys probably have heard of this book, many of you probably haven't. So I'm gonna give you guys a brief summary, give you my thoughts, and yeah, it's a book review. So, while The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi can be described as a book about intergender dynamics and relationships catering mostly to men from their early adolescent years when they're starting to date all the way to men up into their 50s and 60s possibly, The Rational Male could probably be best described as the red pill in book form, or at least an introduction to red pill in book form. So what do you mean by red pill, some of you are probably asking. I'll get into that in just a sec. In its print form, The Rational Male, published in 2013, is a 290-page book, or 190 pages in its PDF form, and it's comprised of 10 chapters spread across 11 sections that are further broken up into a total of 81 subsections, plus an introduction and an afterword. I mentioned the layout of the book because Rollo Tomassi, who has a background in behavioral psychology,
I happened to also be double majoring at the time in fine art and then also in behavioral psychology.
Originally developed many of the ideas he presents in the book in posts he made to online forums such as SoSwap.
I always liked the forum side of things. I liked the interaction between two guys or three guys or 10 guys, whatever. We're all sharing our information. So a lot of the stuff that I was writing about in the very early stages came from these conversations that I had on SoSwap.
Which I'd never heard of until I had read this book, but apparently it's really popular with like the pickup community, and it's a really popular and active forum, and it's also the progenitor of another book called The Book of Pook, which is really popular and that I'm reading now. And so he went on and he later formalized these blog posts in his own blog, therationalmale.com. Many of the posts he made on therationalmale.com were inspired by questions and comments from readers of his blog. And as a matter of fact, it was a reader comment that motivated Tomassi in the first place to codify a collection of his blog posts into a book, as he recounts in his introduction. Each subsection thus reads like a blog post, likely because it was originally written as one. For instance, he has this really defensive tone, but he's also really assertive at the same time with his rhetoric, and so you can definitely tell that he's gone to war in the comments section many a time in order to develop these really well thought out blog posts. So the book is not very difficult to understand stylistically, and it's not very hard to get through either. So before I go into the structure and contents of the book and accidentally ruffle any feathers, I will warn that many of the conclusions and topics Rollo Tomassi describes can seem very tongue-in-cheek or brash, especially to women. With this being said, let's get into some of the terminology used heavily throughout the book and the manosphere. On a side note, if you ever look up the manosphere on Wikipedia, it says that it's this like alt-right extremist group and all this kind of shit. I say forget that. Just think of what I'm saying here as the real definitions of what it's all about, because it's really a lot more tame than Wikipedia or maybe other articles online make it out to be. So I realize that many of you watching this may already be familiar with these terms from your time spent on the internet, but I'm going to go over some of the vocabulary used throughout The Rational Male to make this review as accessible as possible. Something that I like to note is that Tomassi uses a lot of acronyms throughout the book, so bear with me when I'm defining those. So at the beginning of this review, I described the book as being an introduction to red pill. Now, red pill is an allusion to the scene from The Matrix where Morpheus offers Neo a blue pill and a red pill. The red pill allowing him to realize and conceive of the uncomfortable truths behind what it means to live in the Matrix, and the blue pill letting him go back to the blissful ignorance living life inside the Matrix. The scene represents the awakening or the unplugging a la Neo from the Matrix that a reader of The Rational Male, or that any male who draws the same conclusions comes to regarding the nature of women has. That is, hypergamy and the feminine imperative, which I'll get into those momentarily. Tomassi refers to the collective of such unplugged and red-pilled individuals as the manosphere, which I believe are quite different from incels, involuntary celibates, because Tomassi is endorsing things like game and spinning plates, which, among other things in red pill philosophy, I don't think are really compatible with what incels stand for. Hypergamy is based upon the observation that women have the proclivity to mate across and up dominance hierarchies, whereas men tend to mate across and down dominance hierarchies.
Human females engage in hypergamy, and hypergamy is and this is also true cross-culturally, and it's also quite, it's just as extensive in Scandinavia. Not quite, there's a bit of attenuation, but not much. Women mate across and up dominance hierarchies. Men mate across and down.
Thanks, Jordan Peterson. This comes with a whole host of implications, such as that men are disposable, relational equity is an illusion, and a lot more. There's a quote from the book that pretty much sums this up. Women would rather share a high-value man than be saddled with a faithful loser. Hypergamy, by Tomassi's estimation, is largely built upon women's solipsism, which he outlines as being the result of our psychological evolution as a species, having once been a bunch of groups of warring tribes, fighting and killing wild animals. The practice of hypergamy is reinforced culturally by what Tomassi calls the feminine imperative. Now, the feminine imperative consists of any sort of pattern or social convention that normalizes a female upper hand in intergender dynamics or relationships, which may manifest as individual men being programmed or conditioned to be a white knight beta or an AFC, which stands for average frustrated chump, from how they were raised, or as seemingly innocuous sayings like, "she's out of your league," or to embodying anything from the macro dynamics of divorce laws and legal definitions of rape, to the gender bias in military conscription, and down to the smallest details of mundane water cooler talk in the workplace. So the feminine imperative, as so broadly defined, has tons of implications for men at many different levels, but what I think it's most importantly implicated in is what's called the sexual marketplace, or the SMP. Basically, if you take a look at the graph on the screen now, everyone has a sexual market value, or SMV, which individually varies and depends on factors such as attractiveness, status, money, etc. But on the gender-wide level, women tend to peak in their early 20s, and men tend to peak and possibly continue to increase in SMV from their early 30s onward. There are many reasons for why this is, including biology and the tendencies the genders have towards picking the type of career they're going to have, etc., all of which are too much to get into here, but needless to say, the graph that accompanies this section of the book is quite viral within men's self-improvement circles online from what I've seen, and I think the graph really says it all about SMV and SMP. You can even infer things like the wall, which are talked about briefly in The Rational Male, from this graph. So I just mentioned a white knight beta, aka a Captain Save-A-Ho, a particular kind of male who believes he's not like other guys and recognizes male chauvinism, but also thinks he'll be reciprocated with intimacy for his virtuosity and solving females' problems, which Tomassi argues is most likely not the case. And I would probably agree with that. This is a particular subset of just a general beta, or AFC, average frustrated chump, which can be best understood as the opposite of an alpha. While an alpha can be narrowly defined as an animal that's risen to the top of a given dominance hierarchy, especially with regards to mating, Tomassi recognizes that everyone thinks they're alpha in their own way, and emphasizes the positive masculinity way of casting alpha as a self-reliant, independent, confident, assertive male. With regards to alpha, he also constantly brings up the example of Corey Worthington, who he calls the Alpha Buddha, who is this Australian guy who threw a real-life sort of Project X type party at his parents' house while he was in high school, but before Project X was a movie.
Why don't you take your glasses off so we can see you? And then apologise to your neighbours for frightening them.
Nah, I'll leave these on. Nah, I like them.
It isn't about the party so much as the interview on Australian national TV that the Alpha Buddha did, and the vibe or the personality that he gave off during it that so enraptures Tomassi. So while on the one hand we have alphas who are unplugged, spin plates, and have game, on the other hand we have betas who are prone to let's just be friends type rejections, or LJBF rejections, believing a good strategy is to just be yourself, or JBY, and they rely on buffers, which is anything that shelters them from rejection, and they tend to have one-itis, which is an unhealthy romantic obsession with a single person that's usually accompanied by unreciprocated affection and completely unrealistic idealization of said person. So, the last two things I'm going to define are game and spinning plates. Tomassi states that at its root level, game is a series of behavioral modifications to life skills based upon psychological and sociological principles to facilitate intersexual relations between genders. So, like I said, Tomassi's writing seems to have been influenced by or is a reaction to a lot of pickup artists, or which he calls PUA concepts. This reminds me of a cringe show on VH1 back in the day where a PUA going by the moniker Mystery would try to teach hopeless guys how to pick up girls. Not homeless, hopeless.
I just grew tits.
But Tomassi does have some good points, like having a look that when communicating with women that the medium is the message, and not just being a nice guy that placates to women in order to gain their intimacy like a total white knight beta or a Captain Save-A-Ho. So finally, spinning plates is just another way of saying non-exclusivity. The idea is that when you're spinning just one plate on a stick, you're so focused on keeping that plate balanced and keeping it spinning that it's more prone to fall off of whatever you're spinning it on. But if you're spinning multiple plates at once, someone could just come up to you and hand you another plate to spin, and you would spin it effortlessly. Or if you drop one plate, it's not such a big deal because you're spinning a ton of other plates already to begin with. So this concept can be applied even as the setup to a monogamous relationship, believe it or not. Although Tomassi warns his readers to be extremely cautious about monogamy and isn't endorsing cheating, but simply the idea that a man is more valuable to women and more attractive if he has options. Or in other words, women don't want a man to cheat, but they love a man who could cheat. So with all these concepts defined, I'm going to quickly run through how the book is organized and how Tomassi structures his thesis, and then I'm going to delve into my thoughts on the book. So essentially, Tomassi starts off with just the basics of dating, alphas, betas, simple things, and then he moves on to spinning plates, and then he moves on to aspects of what it's like to be plugged in, so to speak, when you're just like believing the feminine imperative, and then he talks about unplugging, so ways to sort of break out of this. Then he talks about aspects of game, and then he talks about things like communication and social conventions and hypergamy just in general. And then he goes into the 9 iron rules of Tomassi. So I'm gonna state these all really quick for you guys. Iron rule number 1, frame is everything. Always be aware of the subconscious balance of whose frame in which you are operating. Always control the frame, but resist giving the impression that you are. Iron rule number 2. Never under pain of death, honestly or dishonestly reveal the number of girls that you've slept with or explain any detail of your sexual experiences with them to a current lover. Iron rule number 3. Any woman who makes you wait for sex, or by her actions implies she's making you wait for sex, is never worth the wait. Iron rule number 4. Never under any circumstance live with a woman you aren't married to or are not planning to marry within 6 months, so no cohabitation. Iron rule number 5. Never allow a woman to be in control of the birth. Iron rule number 6. Women are utterly incapable of loving a man in the way that a man expects to be loved. Iron rule number 7. It is always time and effort better spent developing new, fresh, prospective women than it will ever be in attempting to reconstruct a failed relationship. Never root through the trash once the garbage has been dragged to the curb. Iron rule of Tomassi number 8. Always let a woman figure out why she won't you, never do it for her. An iron rule of Tomassi number 9. Never self-deprecate under any circumstance. At this point, Rollo Tomassi moves into telling some myths that sort of exist in society about relationships and dating, such as the biological clock, the myth that men's looks don't matter, things like that. And then he goes on to say some more about the feminine imperative, and then the book is over. So, with that being said, what do I think of the book? Well, I would give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. So I don't give it a higher score because honestly the book is filled with grammatical errors like then versus than, they are contraction versus there, as in the possessive. I could go on and on, but it's filled with little things like that. Missing punctuation and things like that, where it was just like sometimes it was a little bit hard to read because those things would just like bother me. So I would give it like an 8 out of 10 if it weren't for those grammatical and punctuation errors. But with that being said, it's probably just, you know, copied and pasted for the most part from his blog in the first place. But on the whole, I accept wholesale a lot of what Rollo Tomassi has to say. I think he has a lot of valuable insights for men into dating. I think that part of it is just that men need to have a little bit more of a backbone when it comes to dating and relationships, that it's really too easy for them to placate to women and to just kind of roll over and do whatever women say, hoping that they get laid, because who doesn't want to get laid? And so they just kind of, to use a manosphere terminology, they put pussy on the pedestal, which I think this book is sort of trying to give steps and an antidote to. But it's very concise. It's a lot of it I already had heard of, or like I knew before. So like I said, it really is just a good introduction to Red Pill in book form. But it's a pretty good book, and I would say it's worth the read. I think women could probably gain a lot from reading it as well, just so that they can have a better idea of like what's going on inside men's heads, or like what men's perspective is of women. So great book, and I think all of you guys should read it if you haven't. You can find a PDF of it online, surely, and you can check out some of Rollo Tomassi's blog posts on therationalmale.com, and you can probably read a lot of what's in this book that way. But he also has 2 follow-up books called like Positive Masculinity, and I forgot what the other one's called, but 2 follow-up books to this first book, The Rational Male, of his, and I haven't read them. Maybe I'll read them. They're not very high on my reading list because, like I said, I have a lot on my reading list, including the Book of Pook, which I'm reading now. But I would say it's a pretty good book, and it's really good. So I hope you guys liked my summary of it. Hopefully you didn't mind that I wasn't staring into the camera the whole time, because I've been reading off of my notes so that I have a better book review this time, because my first video on this channel was a book review of The Lonesome Dove, and to be honest, that book review sucked. So I'm trying to step my game up. I want to have more book reviews for you guys. Drop a like, a comment below, hit the bell for notifications, subscribe to my channel, all that good stuff. I'm bringing the vlogs back. I finished my last 8-week cycle. I'm going to do another one. It's all about self-improvement and just becoming the greatest possible versions of ourselves that we can possibly be. I'm going to keep this video as short as possible. Thanks for watching the book review. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
So, quick update for all those who care. Watch all my videos, subscribe, comment.